Hello and welcome to yesterday's airlines for another release ranking video, and it is time for the Gemini Jet November release set because Gemini just announced this a couple of days ago, and it is a smaller set than they have been releasing with only 7 models in it. So that's tiny even by Gemini standards. Don't really know why that is, but it doesn't really matter. We're still going to go through and rank each of these. But before we do that, let's get on and look at what last month's Geminis turned out looking like. And broadly, I have to say, from the Gemini pics, and you always have to put the caveat in that the angle that Gemini takes the photographs hides quite a lot of the detail of the model. With that caveat, they actually turned out looking pretty decent. Obviously, there were some pretty good molds being used here. So things like the American Airlines 787 and the Norse 787, although frankly you could probably have done without them being released at all, they turned out looking pretty good. Also, I have to say that the Emirates 727-200, at least at the angle here and some of the angles from the Emirates store examples, actually looks like a nice model, and that's one I may well pick up. Looking through the rest of the release set here, the 737-900 actually looks decent from this photo angle. It'll look a lot less decent from the side on, so that one looks, okay. 717 again looks superior to previous release Delta 717s, so that may be worth a pick up as well. And then we've got a couple of the more classic aircraft. Seems crazy to call a 757-300 classic, but here I am saying it. Yeah, it looks okay, but the mould showing its age somewhat. And then you've got the 777-500, which is probably the model I would have been most interested in if only Gemini knew what colour United Airlines Battleship Grey was, because it surely isn't that colour of grey. It's so light, it's incredible. I don't think that the Battleship Grey ever looked that light, even once it had been out in the sun for a long time. So that one's a bit of a disappointment. I have to say, I'm not sure I can bring myself to put that alongside my other Battleship Grey 737 or any other Battleship Greys. It will go well with that dreadful CRJ they made a few years back. But yeah, that one's a bit of a shocker. And then there's the Ethiopian 777-9. Looks fine, fancy model. Going to be another one of those we'll be talking about in a few minutes. Okay, so let's talk about next month's releases. That was last month's. But before we get into that, obviously don't forget to subscribe to the channel here if you haven't already, and chuck a like on the vid. If you didn't check out my V1400 release announcement video, then I strongly suggest you get over and do that, because there are some really good US models on there. And don't forget also to check out the sponsor of this video, which is Northeast Diecast, a place full of exciting models in 200 and 400 scale with a really great range. So definitely check them out, and when you do, don't forget to always use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15 for 15% off your order at Northeast Diecast. But let's get on into this set of Gemini November announcements. Now, you've got to say that diversity is not a word you can really associate with this month's Gemini announcements. There are only 7 models. 3 of them are for the same airline, and most of the others are airlines that Gemini releases quite a bit as well. Geographically, we've got the Middle East and North America. So no geographic diversity, and from aircraft type perspective, they're all Boeings. So that's not great either. Having said that, when you actually delve into the models individually, there's a little bit more interest to be had. The first model up is quite unusual, for example. It is a 727-100. Now, I know that Gemini has been getting a bit more into, or back into, should I say, some classic aircraft, which they hadn't been looking at for ages. So that is, I guess that's good to see. The last time they made a 727-100 was back in 2012. In fact, this 727-100 mould didn't get a lot of usage at all. It only got 10 models made between 2009 and 2012 by Gemini. There was a lot of criticism about the way it was being put together, especially the horizontal stabilizers, and they did muck around a bit with the undercarriage as well. But not all the releases are bad. I got a couple of those older releases, the Pan Am one, for example, which is the last one they made, and the Northwest Orient, and they're perfectly decent. It's actually not a dreadful mould at all. This model is United Airlines in the small title Saul Bass N701 uniform is the registration. And it obviously isn't the first time that someone's released a small Tidal Saul Bass 727, but there have only been 2 other releases in the scale. The first one up was from 2000. It was a Jet X model on the Dragon Wings mould. And actually, the Dragon 77100, if it wasn't for the undercarriage and the fact they got the shape of the number 2 engine intake wrong, it's actually not a bad mould. But obviously pretty aged. Arguably, it's a better mould than the Aero Classics mould. And Aero Classics made one in 2020. They made N7026 uniform. I've got that model. And I've got a lot of Aero Classics 77100s. It's not a great mould. And the finish isn't great. I mean, it's a modern Aero Classics. But what are you going to do? There's a good chance this one will be better than the previous versions. I can't say that the mould is spectacular, but it isn't dreadful. You know, it's at least as bad as the others, shall we say. Maybe slightly better than the others. It's still got a seam. It's not a new mould in any regard. But this could be an interesting release. As long as they don't print the cockpit windows quite where they've got them on the artwork, that looks a bit dodge. So I really hope they're not going to print them in that kind of location. That would look a bit weird. But there's potential with this one. I'm not super excited by it. I'm not sure I'm going to waste my time replacing my Aero Classics version with another model, which is okay at best. So I think I'll just put this one up into High Flyer. Got some potential, not completely convincing me. Next up is an Emirates 737-300 A6BC Delta, and this was, I believe, Emirates' first aircraft leased from Pakistan International. And yeah, I knew this model was coming. In fact, I even wrote an article about it at the site because I'd seen it was already up for sale, or someone had told me it was already up for sale at the Emirates store. So it was inevitable it was going to get a release here. Now, it's using the JC Wings mould, which I personally think is okay, but massively dated. And there has been a recent Emirates 737-300 made. It was made by C Models, not widely available because of the usual licensing nonsense. But that was made only towards the end of last year. I got that model via China, and yeah, I really like it because I think the Pan Model 737-300 is excellent, personally. I know that some people complain about the height of the undercarriage or the shape of the tail. I think that's nonsense, really, compared to the fact that the JC Wings one kind of sits tail down and just the overall shape of it isn't particularly good. I think the Panda one is vastly superior. So, yeah, this one, yeah, I know they're making it. They're making it for Emirates, and that's fine. I'm still going to workhorse it, though. It's not one that I feel the need to buy, and it's not as good as the previous C models release. Next up is a 737 MAX 9. It is Aero Mexico XA Golf Quebec Sierra, the Kukulkan Mexico City scheme. A beautiful livery, really very attractive, and it would be a spectacularly good release choice if it hadn't already been made previously by NG Models. They released this in April 25. And there's no way that the Gemini version is going to be better than the NG one. I'm sorry. Looking at the pictures of the NG one, it looks awesome. Helped by the fact that the NG 737 MAX 9 mould looks like a 737 MAX 9. Now, the MAX 9 mould is better for Gemini, without a shadow of a doubt. It's much better than their 737-800s, 900s. So this should be a good release, but it's not quite as good as the NG one. And NG got there before you guys, about 6 months before you guys. So yeah, again, it's probably been made for Aero Mexico. It's a perfectly okay model, but it's also a perfectly workhorse model. Okay, so that takes us through nearly half the set, and the next model up is about as Gemini as things can get. It is a Delta 767-300 ER N199 Delta November, and the last time Gemini made a Delta 767 in this scheme was in July 23, but they'd also made one in 2018, and then they'd made one in 2015 with winglets. They made one without winglets in 2017. You get the picture. They made one in 2013, they made one in 2012, they made one in 2011 and 2010. They made a lot of these, and they all use the same mould. They all look the same. It's a scene mould. It's okay. It's showing its age. It certainly can't compete with the Panda Models mould, which has actually had a Delta release on it. They made N176 Delta Zulu in November last year. NG also used their mould in June last year to make a couple of Delta 763s. I know people have got some issues with the winglets on those, quite correctly. I'd still take it over this Gemini mould, to be quite honest. But the Panda one certainly will knock the Gemini out of the park by miles. So again, you know, what are you going to do? This is such a Gemini model, such a boring release, probably a corporate model workhorse. Okay, cool. Now that gets us through to the last 3 models in this release set, super quick because it's not a big set. And the next pair up, a bit more interesting, even if the airline isn't. These are both Emirates. They are Emirates Sky Cargo. They are 777 freighters, A6 Echo Foxtrot Victor. One of these is a standard doors closed model, so just a usual release, and the other one is an interactive version of the same aircraft. There have been previous interactive and standard release Emirates Sky Cargo 777 freighters, but not in the updated livery. So these two actually really good. I think they will be great. I really like the interactive 777 freighter that JC Wings and Gemini use. I think it's really superb. So these are actually spectacularly good choices, I think, even if they are really standard Gemini releases. So I'm going to put one of these up into High Fly. I'm going to put the interactive version up into Supersonic. I think that one is bonza, and one that I tempted to get for my airport. Don't know, might have a look at that one. But I really like the interactive 777s. So even though it's Emirates, still worth producing, I'd say. And the last model this month is another fantasy 777-9. This one is Qatar Airways. Looks like this one's coming down with the wing tips down as opposed to folded. A7 of Bravo Kilo Alpha is the registration. Yeah, maybe it's being made for Qatar, but just like the Ethiopian previously and whatever the month before that was, I don't think it's real. And I'm not sure when Qatar are going to get their 777s, but probably not this year. It might be next year. It's certainly, yeah, unnecessary to make it now. But it's probably a corporate order, and, you know, all well and good if Qatar want this. Not for me, though. Fantasy model, pretty boring. Gonna gas guzzle that one. Mold's okay, I admit, but it's a fantasy model. Okay, so that very quickly wraps up this month's Gemini announcements. This is such a Gemini set, and looking through this set, you could easily believe that all of these were corporate orders. The United 77 probably isn't, but I get the feeling that all of the others are. The Emirates 77 certainly is. It wouldn't surprise me if those Sky Cargo ones are too. The Qatar, the Delta, Arabesco, probably corporate orders. This is not a release set being made for collectors. This is a release set being made for corporate customers. Nothing wrong with that in itself. Gotta sell your models, but yeah, not exciting at all, really. And as per usual, one of the issues that Gemini has is that a lot of their mold catalogue is just very aged. So you've got 767s and 737s that don't compete well with the competition because they're just so old. The 767-100, as I said, it's not a new mold. It does compete reasonably well, but only because the competition is so weak. So yeah, not a lot to talk about in this one, I think, but a couple of interesting models, mainly that Sky Cargo freighter. But I'm interested to see what the United 727 turns out like as well. Okay, and that is it for the November Gemini Jets release announcements. Up next in the release rankings will be the Phoenix November announcements, which I should have done before this video, really, because they were announced prior to it, but I felt like talking about the Geminis first. So I will be getting to the Phoenix November set, which of course is a lot more diverse than this one, and that will be my next video. But thank you very much for watching, everyone. Really appreciate that, and I'll see you next time at Yesterday's Airlines. Stay tuned for more.